जय ओम विष्णुपाद परमहंस प्रभुजकाचार्य स्तोत्र सत अभय चरणारविंद भक्ति वेदांत स्वामी प्रभुपाद की। इस्कॉन फाउंडर आचार्य बीबीटी फाउंडर आचार्य श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय। जय ओम विष्णुपाद परमहंस प्रभुजकाचार्य स्तोत्र सत श्री श्रीमद् भक्ति सिद्धांत सरस्वती ठाकुर गोस्वामी महाराज प्रभुपाद की। अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की। ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम की। निताय गौर प्रेमानंदी। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 9. Bhagavatam is the answer to all questions. Text, Chapter 10, Text 9. एकम एकतरा भावे यदा नोपलभामहे तृतीयं तत्र यो वेदा सा आत्मा स्वाश्रयाश्रया। एकम एकतरा भावे यदा नोपलभामहे तृतीयं तत्र यो वेदा सा आत्मा स्वाश्रयाश्रया। एकम एकतरा भावे यदा नोपलभामहे तृतीयं तत्र यो वेदा स आत्मा स्वाश्रयाश्रया। एकम एकतरा भावे यदा नोपलभामहे तृतीयं तत्र यो वेदा स आत्मा स्वाश्रयाश्रया। एकम एकतरा भावे यदा नोपलभामहे तृतीयं तत्र यो वेदा स आत्मा स्वाश्रयाश्रया। एकम एकतरा भावे यदा नोपलभामहे तृतीयं तत्र यो वेदा स आत्मा स्वाश्रया। एकम एकतरा भावे यदा नोपलभामहे तृतीयं तत्र यो वेदा स आत्मा स्वाश्रयाश्रया। माताजी प्लीज। एकम एकतरा भावे यदा नोपलभामहे तृतीयं तत्र यो वेदा स आत्मा स्वाश्रयाश्रया। एकम एकतरा भावे यदा नोपलभामहे Tritiyam tatra yo veda sa atma svashraya shraya. Synonyms: ekam, one; ekatara, another; abhave, in the absence of; yada, because; na, does not; upalabhamahe, perceptible; tritayam, in three stages; tatra, there; yaha, the one; veda, who knows; saha, he; atma, the super soul; sva, own; ashraya, shelter; ashraya, of the shelter. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace Abhay Charnarvind Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Translation: all three of the above mentioned stages of different living entities are interdependent. In the absence of one, another is not understood. But the Supreme Being, who sees every one of them as the shelter of the shelter, is independent of all, and therefore He is the Supreme Shelter. Purport: there are innumerable living entities, one dependent on the other, in the relationship of the controlled and the controller. But without the medium of perception, no one can know or understand who is the controlled and who is the controller. For example, the sun controls the power of our vision. We can see the sun because the sun has its body, and the sunlight is useful only because we have eyes. Without our having eyes, the sunlight is useless, and without sunlight, the eyes are useless. Thus, they are interdependent, and none of them is independent. Therefore, the natural question arises concerning who made them interdependent. The one who has made such a relationship of interdependence must be ultimately completely independent. As stated in the beginning of the Srimad Bhagavatam, the ultimate source of all interdependent objectives is the complete independent subject. This ultimate source of all interdependence is the Supreme Truth, or Paramatma, the Super Soul, who is not dependent on anything else. He is Swashraya. He is only dependent on his self, and thus he is the supreme shelter of everything. Although Paramatma and Brahman are subordinate to Bhagavan, because Bhagavan is Purushottama, or the super person. He is the source of the super soul also. In the Bhagavad Gita 15:18, Lord Krishna says that he is the Purushottama and the source of everything. And thus it is concluded that Sri Krishna is the ultimate source and shelter of all entities, including the Super Soul and Supreme Brahman. Even accepting that there is no difference between the Super Soul and the individual soul, The individual soul is dependent on the supersoul for being liberated from the illusion of material energy. The individual is under the clutches of illusory energy, and therefore, although qualitatively one with the supersoul, he is under the illusion of identifying himself with matter. And to get out of this illusory conception of factual life, the individual soul has to depend on the supersoul to be recognized as one with him. In that sense, also the supersoul is the supreme shelter, and there is no doubt about it. The individual living entity, the jiva, is always dependent on the supersoul, Paramatma, because the individual soul forgets his spiritual identity, whereas the supersoul, Paramatma, does not forget his transcendental position. In the Bhagavad Gita, these separate positions of the Jivatma and the Paramatma are specifically mentioned. In the 4th chapter, Arjuna, the Jiva soul, is represented as forgetful of his many previous births. But the Lord, the Supersoul, is not forgetful. The Lord even remembers when he taught the Bhagavad Gita to Sun God some billions of years before. The Lord can remember such millions and billions of years as stated in the Bhagavad Gita 7:26 as follows. Vedaham samatittani vartmanani cha arjuna bhavishyani cha bhutani mantu vedana kashana. The Lord, in his eternal blissful body of knowledge, is fully aware of all that happened in the past, that which is going on at the present, and also what will happen in the future. But in spite of his being the shelter of both the Paramatma and Brahman, persons with a poor fund of knowledge are unable to understand him as he is. The propaganda of the identity of cosmic consciousness with the consciousness of the individual living entities is completely misleading, because even such a person or individual soul as Arjuna could not remember his past deeds, although he is always with the Lord. And what can the tiny ordinary man, falsely claiming to be one with the cosmic consciousness, know about his past, present, and future? Om Jnanatimirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namah. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Swapadantikam. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha kripasindhubhya eva cha patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namah. So, this verse is actually a continuation from the previous verse. As it mentions here in the translation, all three of the above mentioned stages of different living entities are independent. So these three stages were mentioned in yesterday's verse. And they are Adi Atmik, Adi Devik, and Adi Bhautik. So Gauranga Prem Prabhu explained about it yesterday. And in this verse, it's talking about a stage ahead, which is about the ashraya, swashraya shrayaha, means the shelter of the shelter. So the first text in this chapter it confirms, states 10 subjects that are covered in Srimad Bhagavatam. And one of them is about the shelter, the ashraya, samam bonam. But before that, Srila Prabhupada, he mentions few points in this purport. So I'll try to cover some of those. So one main point that is even mentioned in the translation is of interdependence. And interestingly enough, I don't know how many of us would figure this out, but in the purport, Srila Prabhupada, as he mentions, that a natural question would be to wonder who has made this interdependence, who is the person, what force is there that is making this interdependence happen, because that personality would be completely independent. And it reminds me of the first text of the Srimad Bhagavatam. Janmadi ashayato anvayata itartaschartesha abhigyaswara tene brahma hridaya adhikave mohayanti yatsuraya tejo vari mridam yatha vinimayo yatra trisargo hamsa dhamna svena sada nirasta kuhakam satyam param dhimahi. So Vyasadeva is meditating on this samam bonam, the absolute truth. That's how Vyasadeva starts Srimad Bhagavatam. After hearing from Narada Muni, and there it's mentioned actually, this whole thing is happening because of these three different stages. They are there due to the fruitive activities. So depending on one's karma, one is placed in the position of being controlled, and someone else is in the position of being the controller, like the demigods. They are the controlling deities of this cosmic creation. But then there are also other higher beings who are even more advanced than the demigods in the heavenly planets. And we know all these things from the Bhagavatam. So it's also another point is it depends on one's intelligence, what kind of activities one would engage in. Based on one's intelligence, one would take to certain kind of activities. Like in the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, one is by one's guna and karma. That's how one can see where one is. So the devotees, because their intelligence is more clear, more advanced, so they are able to understand this controller who makes this arrangement of being the controlled and the controller. But a person who is influenced by the three gunas, such a person, for them, is very difficult to accept this position of the Supreme Lord, that who can control all these living entities. And it is seen even in the different occasions in the lives of even higher advanced beings. They are influenced by these three gunas, and influenced by the three gunas, time to time they forget the position of the Lord, and they end up acting in a way which, not being influenced by the gunas, they wouldn't have ordinarily acted. Like one of the pastimes I can remember is about Brahma. When Lord Brahma, he saw Krishna as a little cowherd boy, and he, just for a moment, he had this thought, oh, could that little boy be my Supreme Lord? And he decided to test it. So, um, Brahma, we know the whole pastime how Brahma stole all the calves and cowherd boys. But then Lord Krishna, he manifested after he noticed for a moment, even Krishna was like searching for his friends and the calves, and so he acted like a person, but then again his internal energy, the pastime energy, and he manifested all these calves and the cowherd boys, and Brahma, he's bewildered by seeing this. He's like checking the place where he took Krishna's friends and the calves, and he's like bewildered. What's going on? They are there and they are here also. So, and then it's Srila Prabhupada. I was reading this chapter in Krishna book other day, and Srila Prabhupada, he mentions actually, of course, he's translating from the Bhagavatam. So he's saying that just to clarify to Brahma that the calves and cowherd boys he has, they are the real ones that he stole. And these ones, they are the ones that Krishna incarnated, and they are all Vishnu Tattvas actually, because Krishna himself manifested as calves and cowherd boys. So just to make it clear to Brahma, after when Brahma was in such a condition, he revealed all the Vishnu forms of all the cowherd boys and the calves, and then Brahma realized who he is dealing with, and he's my Supreme Lord, who I was kind of for a moment bewildered to understand who is this little cowherd boy. So that's for the, of course, we understand these are like very special occasions where even great devotees, they are put into illusory condition. So, but if we see in the world here, generally, most people, they are not participating in these kind of pastimes. They are actually bewildered by their own ego, ahankara, and influenced by the modes, they take to these activities. And what happens? The forgetfulness takes over. So Krishna says this in the Bhagavad Gita, Sarvasya chaham hridhi sanivishto matta smritir jnanam apohanam cha. So remembrance and forgetfulness, they both come from the Lord. But when the living entity, they become non-cooperative, I should say, then they are covered by this illusory energy. They come under the influence of the gunas, three gunas. And it's interesting how it's mentioned here, the three stages. So the people who are in that kind of consciousness, they are taken over by these three gunas, and they come under the influence of these three stages where the controlling deities become the demigods. So the living entities on this planet especially, they are controlled by all the demigods now. And we also know even So even the demigods, they are sometimes being controlled by the living entities who are more demoniac in nature. So sometimes the demons, they become more powerful. Just like one example is Ravana. He became so powerful, um, and even Hiranyakashipu, he became so powerful. He took control of all the three planetary systems, and even the great sages, they had to, you know, be cooperative with him. So sometimes these situations happen, and people who may not be so accepting of the supremacy of the Lord, they may seem to uh, become controllers, but only temporarily, and only in the limited realms of the material cosmos, not beyond that. Um, so when a situation like this happens, then it's the time for Supreme Lord to exhibit his powers. And we can easily understand this from especially this pastime of how Hiranyakashipu is mentioned in the, I guess it's in the Lagu Bhagavatamrita. So there is mentioned even after being killed by Nrsimhadev, Hiranyakashipu, he didn't like completely, he wasn't completely liberated. He had to come back again. And but when he was actually killed by Krishna, that's when he attained liberation, and he became free from this. Because the point was mentioned that Hiranyakashipu, when he saw Nrsimhadev, he didn't see him as the Lord. He was just like bewildered. What is this form? It's like neither man, neither animal. So he couldn't really understand the personal aspect of God, and that's why he couldn't get like liberated completely. He had to come back, and when he saw Krishna, in that's when. So it's mentioned that the ultimate shelter is Krishna, and that's one of the main subjects of the Bhagavatam, to help one come to that understanding. So from first 9 cantos, does anyone know the 10 subjects that the Bhagavatam covers? It's in the first text. Yeah. So it's interesting how even the subjects are mentioned. We can see the title of the first canto is creation, and that's so it's everything is very systematically organized. So even the topics, how Sukadev Goswami says it, Atra Sarga means the creation. So like that, and the last topic is Ashraya, the Samam Bonam. So you can see first 9 cantos, it makes sense how it's mentioned one should approach Srimad Bhagavatam in a systematic way from first canto, second canto, like that, come up to the 10th canto. Because in the 10th canto, the personal pastimes of Krishna are mentioned. But to be able to understand those, one has to come through those first 9 cantos, so one can understand how it's all arranged in such a way that one can come to a proper understanding of the personal aspect. Because like how one of the points is mentioned is many spiritualists, many so-called popular gurus these days, they talk about this merging into the one cosmic consciousness, becoming one with the cosmic consciousness. But interesting how Srila Prabhupada mentions here the example of Arjuna. Arjuna was always with Krishna, and still he asks Krishna this question that how can you remember all these previous and even future lives? I cannot remember my past life. So Srila Prabhupada is saying this idea is very misleading for people to think that they can be one with the cosmic consciousness, because what to talk about past or present, people can't even remember what we did few days ago or maybe previous day. So this forgetfulness is so strong, but as it's mentioned, the jiva, its situation is to be dependent. So the intelligence is seen when one accepts this, that I am dependent. But further intelligent person, he considers who I should be depending on. So we can see examples of great devotees, acharyas. Their strength was to be depending on Krishna, on advanced devotees, following the Mahajans. So that's where the actual intelligence is, because then we are connected to this samam bonam, the source of all this strength. And that's where one becomes powerful. We can see even in our own lives the example of Srila Prabhupada, especially those who are his disciples, they get to have personal association with him. But we can see there are so many gurus talking about God, different spiritual practices, but before even many gurus came from India presenting Bhagavad Gita, but before Srila Prabhupada came to America, they could not really make devotees of Krishna. But we can see how by Srila Prabhupada's coming to America, there are so many people, they became devotees, and we see so many temples around the world, so many activities happening in educating others about the science of Krishna. And it's amazing that we have this opportunity also, especially these days. People are becoming a bit more favorable to receiving this knowledge, and we can see even in general like how our scores of distribution of Krishna literature has increased significantly. And even on personal experience, like going to different schools these days, so many more students, they are saying this, oh, because of I had so much time, so I started looking into meditation, spirituality, like that. So many people, they are starting to realize the importance of this knowledge. And we have this great fortune to be having this knowledge, so we can take advantage to be sharing it with others, and just keeping it to ourselves. And that ways we can also please our gurus, our acharyas, and the Lord, and we receive more mercy and more strength in that way. So the main point is to think that we are always dependent, no matter what our position we may be. Even one may be in like a high position, in a leadership position, or whatever position, but we can see even someone like Brahma, who actually created this cosmic material cosmos. Even he's dependent. He's not independent. So the only independent person is Krishna. And it's interesting, you can see even Sukadev Goswami, or to say Vyasadev, he doesn't mention Krishna straight away. In the first verse, he is just saying the supreme absolute truth. He doesn't say Krishna. Um, and even here, Sukadev Goswami, he is also not mentioning Krishna. So gradually we will see as we progress through these cantos, we will start to hear Krishna more. So it's a gradual preparation of the consciousness to be accepting. So even in our own example, we can see we may be we may have started to develop appreciation for certain aspect of spirituality, maybe a mantra, or maybe certain cultural event, festival, or something. And it may have taken time. I can say for myself personally, like I was not very clear with different demigods, and like I used to wonder sometimes who is actual God. Like there can't be so many, there has to be one person. And sometimes I used to wonder, but it's amazing, unless I actually came to read the Bhagavad Gita, i I couldn't understand before that. So mentally we may speculate to endless limits, but we won't be able to come to a conclusion. We actually have to uh, take to these texts, Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, which are clearly stating this, and also the shelter of the devotees, because even the books one cannot understand on their own, because our intelligence is so limited. And also, like we can see how just by understanding the purports of Srila Prabhupada, it makes it so easy to understand the text. Just by reading the translation, after separating the, oh, sorry, I'm the ninth. All three of the above mentioned stages of different living entities are interdependent. I was wondering which three stages is he talking about. So unless I refer to previous text, and not only that, I mean, how many of us will understand what is Adhyatmic, what is Adhibhautik, what is Adhidevik? But when you read the purport, Srila Prabhupada is explaining what it is, so it becomes easy to understand. And so we also need the association of devotees. And when we hear from realized souls, then we can understand what is this force, what is this personality behind this whole arrangement. So it cannot be emphasized enough to take to study of these books. And of course, if we share this knowledge with others, then we will get more realizations, and this misleading aspect of people who are misleading others, their influence would naturally be reduced. So yeah, just remembering from especially from the pastime of Lord Brahma, we will always be in a position of being controlled. We can never be the controller, because this position is always taken. But what we can be the cooperators with the desires of the Lord. That's what Arjuna did, and he is glorified timelessly. Everyone knows about the how Arjuna was able to win the greatest battle, and they knew for sure. Like Bhishma Dev, Kauravas, they had such leaders. They were like, no, they couldn't be defeated. Bhishma Dev, no one could defeat them. I was reading this part of Mahabharata, and actually Arjuna, Krishna gave him the idea, he had to go and ask Bhishma Dev that, look, as long as you are there, we cannot win this battle. And Bhishma Dev, he understood. So, he gave him the secret how Arjuna can defeat him. But it's amazing, Bhishma Dev, he wasn't envious of Arjuna. He was pleased, and he wanted them to win the battle. So he gave him the secret. So the devotees are like that. They have all these powers they can give to people who are in proper consciousness. And but if we don't approach them, we don't receive it. So therefore, it's also important to approach the devotees who have these qualities, these powers. They are awarded to them, and by having that kind of consciousness, by serving them, we can receive them, just like how Srila Prabhupada, he empowered his disciples, and gradually they are empowering the followers. So, yeah, let's remember our position of dependence, and work together to share this wisdom with others. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. It's already time, so I guess we can just conclude here. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.